What is going on, Bucs fans? Back here at the Pirate Parlay podcast on the Sick Podcast Network. Of course, I'm your host, JC Allen, and we got a special guest with you today, the man who nurtured my career, who brought me, helped bring me to the place I am today, none other than Jon Ledyard. Super excited to have him on. We're going to talk about this Raiders game, the laundry list, Christmas list, whatever wish list of that is the Bucs injury report. We'll get into a little bit of the Chargers game, who surprised him this season, and so much more. Super excited to have him on the podcast. I believe it's his first time, so excited to have him on, and we'll get into all that and more after the break.
Turn up your volume, because you're about to listen to the Sick Podcast. Pirate Parlay.
Battle intercepted, picked off in the end zone. Bucs are going to beat the Chiefs. We're the champions of the world.
The sickest Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. It's going to be sick.
Welcome back to the other side. I want to thank everyone for listening, for tuning in. If you're on one of the streaming networks, listen to this as a podcast version. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for showing the love. Make sure you guys leave some reviews there. If you're in the chat right now, go ahead and like, subscribe, turn notifications. Let people know. Pass the word. Share it to a family member, friend, whatever. Do it right now. Tell them to get on. We've got a great show for you planned today. So definitely appreciate you guys here. Again, comments, questions, anything for me, anything for Jon, definitely drop it in the chat. We'll get it going. But without further ado, let me introduce the man. I have so much love for him, for kind of bringing me out of the slums and help guiding my career to where it is today. He's been a big part of my life, and is super excited to have him on here. He's everywhere. Audibles and Analytics, Bucs Edition podcast, Yinzer Knows Best podcast. If you're a Steelers fan, he's writing for several little spots there, writing his own. He's got his first of many, I hope, Audibles and Analytics YouTube page breakdown. We'll get into that. That was an awesome watch the other day. By the other day, I mean today. And you can also find him on PFF Rookie Review with the one and only Tampa Bay Trevor Sikkema. Ladies and gentlemen, other than Mr. Jon Ledyard. How are you?
Well, I'm doing great. I have been on this podcast with you before, but it has been a while, and I owe you one. It's been a while, yeah. But I'm pretty sure I've been on here with you before. But I am very excited to be back with you for sure. As always, a ton of fun. You give yourself no credit when I come on these shows, but I appreciate the kind words nonetheless. And yeah, I got out of this field full time, only to have a laundry list of things that I still do in this field, even though I have another full-time job. So I don't know that much actually changed in the end, even though I thought a lot would.
No, but because it just draws you back in no matter what. And let's be honest, talking about it is a lot easier and a lot more fun than writing about it. That's why you have like 5 different podcasts. You got one with Ollie. You have one with Josh Capo that I've been a guest on. You got another one with, who is it?
Most of the time it's just me on the Ins No Ball podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, the Read Optional podcast twice a week with Ollie Connolly. We talk NFL. Josh, and you've been on there with me talking Bucs on the Bucs Edition pod. And then I do a lot of writing too in Audibles and Analytics, and I'll have a lot of draft scouting reports over there as well going up. And then I just started dipping into the YouTube content biz with that Baker Mayfield video. So we'll see if that continues. I've made things in the past, but my time is not that available these days. So whatever I have time for, we'll see if I can get done.
We're going to get into that definitely, because that was awesome. And if you guys, I'll definitely show you guys where to go to get it. Definitely check that out because it's amazing stuff. Shout out to Ollie, your co-host too, by the way, breaking the big news that Bill Belichick's going back. He's going back to college, taking over for the Tar Heels down there. What's your thoughts on that before we jump into Bucs talk?
It's really fascinating because I think it's one of those moves that could be a precursor for more of these types of moves where the attraction of the college game appeals to more former NFL coaches or NFL coaches that have very little college experience, but see it now as more of a professional landscape where their skills are going to be best utilized, and that may be actually attractive to them. Whereas those moves backward have usually happened after a firing or they weren't desired at the NFL level in the past. And so I think it could open that kind of a door. Also could restructure the way the college programs, if he is successful, tend to think about things, because make no mistake, Belichick, from everything all he has said and reported, it sounds like he wants to make this a football institution, not even an athletic institution,
right?
And perhaps at the cost of the fact that UNC is a great academic institution. Those things may end up taking a backseat ultimately to the vision that Belichick has for it, at least. So it will be really interesting to see if that is indeed how things play out and what tension there is with the rest of the university if things play out that way. So a lot to learn from this situation, which is why we'll be watching it closely. There will be a lot more to it than just wins and losses, but from that perspective, certainly has a really good chance to make things happen in an ACC conference. I don't know how loaded that thing's going to be in the coming years.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And I think you made up a good point there. A lot of like, it's taboo, you're in the NFL level, you go back to college, it's seen as a step backwards. We even seen guys take the move to go to like XFL or the UFL or any of these like startup leagues because it's not maybe as looked down as bad as going back to college, but with the way they're setting this up. And it's going to be really interesting with the whole GM situation there with Lombardi coming back and kind of playing GM while Belichick just plays coach. And I think that might be attractive to a lot of former GMs and some former coaches who might want to dabble back. And depending on how this goes, I think they'll wait a year or two to see how everything goes. But let's get into Bucs talk because that's what we're here for. Let's talk about this Raiders game, and let's bring it right up because you already mentioned it. Baker Mayfield, a tale of two Bakers, like it has been much of the last two seasons with the Bucs. But you really broke down some of his inefficiencies and some of his just uncanny, amazing things he can do with the ball at times. I thought that was a really informational piece that you did over there, and it's at Audibles and Analytics over on YouTube. Check it out. It's like a 45-minute piece, well worth your time. But just kind of talk about the Baker Mayfield and your impressions of how he's been this season for the Bucs, where he can ascend and has he kind of held this team back at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky conversation because when the Bucs are at their best and when their offense is hitting on all cylinders, Baker's skill set is certainly a cog in that machine that makes it go. Now there's a lot of guys schemed open in this system, but they also ask him to do everything. I mean, the Bucs use the whole field. They aren't an oversimplified offense by any stretch of the imagination. There can be stretches certainly where his responsibility and workload isn't that much considering the one read options that they have in their offense and the run game, obviously being able to complement them well, but they ask him to do a lot. I mean, the straight drop back game, they want him to hit explosives off play action. They use the horizontal areas of the field, the middle of the field, the vertical portions. This is not an offense siloed to any one area of the field. There's motions. There's lots of pre-snap stuff. There's lots of ball handling. So they really do rely on the fact that he has a pretty high end. When you talk about just skill set and physical ability and the propensity to be able to do everything, they really do lean into that. They try and utilize all of him as a quarterback and don't try to really simplify that part of it for him. And so in that way, him at his best is when the Bucs offense is at their best. There's no doubt about that. They really need him to be great. And at times he has been, and that's allowed them to be at their best. So that part of it is definitely true. This isn't like the system quarterback label is a dumb one, but it gets thrown out there, and that's not what he's been. He's not carried by everything around him. Everything helps, and they make it an environment which he can thrive in when he's at his best. Whereas in the past, I don't know if that's always been the case for the situations he's been in. But there also is the other side of it, JC, where him at his worst has completely destroys the offense and completely shuts down the progress that they've made. Almost every time the Bucs offense has struggled this season, it has been because of penalties, at times drops, but those always happen. It has been because of penalties, or it has been because of Baker Mayfield mishandling the pocket or turning down open receivers to try and make hero plays, or really it's unexplainable at times why he turns down. He's even said that. He's like, I moved too fast through progressions to get sped up and I miss things that are open. And I think he's right. Like that is a fair characterization or criticism of his game at times. And it's really unpredictable when that will happen. It isn't because of pressure. It isn't necessarily because of blitzes. There are aspects of those things that can exacerbate the situation. But overall, his flaws just sort of exist, and they pop up at any point, and it can be 2 quarters of just full unraveling at the position. And that is what kind of makes him unique, in that it's not one throw here or there, but instead it is kind of a litany of issues that can happen at that time. So lots to get into for certainly with his skill set, but the highs and lows and the variance definitely make him one of those roller coaster type of quarterbacks, which the league has to deal with. I mean, that's just the reality. Not everybody is, the caliber of a Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow or players like that. Yeah. But I think Mayfield is one of those guys whose high-end abilities are worth kind of sticking out through these times for.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you mentioned, it comes out of nowhere, but recently it's throughout, I think, majority of this season, it's happening in the second and third quarter, and his fourth quarter numbers are outstanding. You see what he's been able to do in fourth quarters, leading drives, leading comebacks, even earlier in the game. I mean, it took the Bucs a while to get started. They had gone forever. I think it was 22 games without a first drive touchdown. They cracked that streak, and they start this game against the Raiders with back-to-back touchdowns. Baker's driving them down the field. Everything looks good. Liam Cohen has been absolutely amazing, I think, and we'll talk about him because I know you got an affinity for him as much as I do. But, it seems like it's the meltdowns happen in the second quarter. The big one we can talk about is the Saints, right? I mean, 27 points, and they just could not get anything going offensively. And then they turn around, and they end up scoring almost 50 points on the guys. So, what do you think it is about Baker specifically in that third quarter that he struggles so much with? Is it the fact that the scripted plays are over and now defenses are adjusting to what they're doing? And if that's the case, why isn't that plaguing him throughout the entirety of the game? Why is he being able to turn around in the fourth quarter?
I don't know if it could be something to the script part of it. It's hard to tell because it's really not like they dramatically changed their approach after the scripted portion or the first quarter, things like that. I mean, guys are still open. Like, it's still kind of the same stuff for him. And yet maybe he just doesn't feel the same sense of comfortability with what they're doing. But I think more than anything, it's just the reality of the inconsistencies of who he's been as a passer. It's why he's not hit. It's not been about a physical limitation or, for a while we thought, oh, maybe he's just too short. He won't throw over the middle of the field. And that's not been an issue in Tampa Bay. He's thrown over the middle of the field fine. Like, he throws in breakers great. He had 2 huge ones to win this game. And so, I don't think those are limitations on him. There really isn't like a physical or he can't make that throw, or he can't do this, or this isn't. He can do everything. He can play outside the pocket. Like, he can do all those things. It's just a matter of whether he will play within the structure and within the confines of who he should be as a quarterback. He is not going to be Lamar Jackson. So if you want to go that far with the limitation, you can say those sorts of things. But this was true about him in college, and it's really never changed, JC, to a degree. He has always been a player who welcomes chaos as a quarterback. And that is, you walk a razor's edge when you do that. And he will play outside of that for portions of the game. And then there will be the portion of the game, almost every game, where he decides, I'm going to live in chaos. And we've seen it, week 1, he was doing it, but he was getting out of all of these rushes, right? He's breaking tackles, he's scrambling, every play he made, right? And it all hit. The process wasn't always good, but the result were great. And then there'll be games where he tries to do that. And that was his past game. And for 2 quarters, it's just a complete disaster. You take 4 sacks you shouldn't take. You put the ball in harm's way 3 times. Like, all that kind of stuff happens. And it's like, okay, like, who exactly are we talking about here when it comes to this quarterback? Because those kinds of things can really derail the offense. And I think a lot of the time he gets really happy feet in the pocket, or he does not aware of his spacing as it relates to the rest of the offensive line. So a couple of times, and I talk about this in the video, somebody's losing slowly, or maybe not losing, but not in an optimal position in pass protection. There's still, in all the cases I highlighted, there's still somebody between him and the blocker in these situations. Right. So you just have to navigate the pocket and help your blocker stay on his angle a little bit, because not every play is going to be 100%. All 5 guys up front, the tight ends, the backs, everybody's firmed up 100%. And you've got this nice 5-yard pocket. That happens more for him. He leads the league. Yeah, he leads the league in clean pockets this season. He has the most of any quarterback in the league this season. However, every time it's not clean, the results can be totally varied. He could make a great throw under pressure. He's done it. Or he could completely turtle up and take a sack, or try to break 3 tackles and take a sack and fumble the ball. And like, all of those things are available in our options. And so you just never really know what you're going to get. And he also kind of will move into or toward pressure at times and not help his blockers out. So how he handles the pocket, just in general, pocket management, I don't even think it's the pressure itself per se. I just think it's the management of the actual space in the pocket. And that's one of the things that needs to work on and continue to be better.
Yeah, he's no Tom Brady. He lacks that feel for sure. When to take a step to the left, when to take a step to the right, and just kind of know that, all right, my blocker's got me. If I just pivot a little bit, or I move, step up here, step back here, it's going to buy me an extra half a second to survey the field and get rid of the ball. Brady did it better than anybody I've ever seen play. And I love the chaos that you bring up, the Washington game. I bring up the Joey Bosa game where he's literally stiff arming with one hand and just hits a miracle play. And it's just like, you never know what you're going to get. And when it hits, it's Baker magic. When it's not, it's like, what are you doing? So it's fun. It's fun to watch, though. It definitely keeps you entertained. But you mentioned it, the cleanest pocket in the NFL so far this year in the league. Talk about those big guys up front. I know you're a big Cody Moat guy. I know, I'm a big Luke Gedeke guy. I've been on those guys. Ben Bredesen has really surprised, I think, this year. after not having much stability, especially last year. But with the Giants, that's a whole nother story. But just obviously Tristan's going to do Tristan. I thought Graham's played really well. You do the rookie review, so you got to kind of dive in to Graham a little bit more on a weekly basis, comparing him with, your guy, Zach Frazier. Just talk about this offensive line, the cohesiveness of it, and how you think they're able to play, this well, especially in a new offensive system, a new coaching staff, and a lot of new pieces, 2 new guys on there.
Yeah, it's been unbelievable, the coaching job and the development. And I think Liam Cohen's ability to lean into who these guys are from a skill set perspective and use them best. I mean, Gedeke and Mauk are probably the biggest 2 in terms of the way they've developed this season. Yeah. And Gedeke started to last year, and now both of them have really developed, I think, fully into one of the better right tackle, right guard combos in the league. And that has elevated the offense. They are, if you look at this run game renaissance, they have been key pieces of all of that. Barton being able to do his job is key. Wirfs is excellent across the board. Bredesen, they can get by on. He has done some good things. But Mauk and Gedeke are really the key players, them as pullers, them in space. Your utilization of those guys, the double team and combos to the second level. If you watch all of those things on tape, those 2 have become really dynamic in their usage, I would say. That's probably one of the most overlooked things. It's not just that these guys are good, it's also that they're really versatile. So you can run the most extensive screen package in the league and ask these guys to get out constantly. And you see Cody Mauk in this past game, first quarter, 20, 25 yards downfield, not taken out of safety and taken out of DB. And so those kinds of things, their ability to target square. I mean, Barton on that play gets out, gets the linebacker, gets around and walls him off, and the back's able to get down the sideline. Rachaad White is. So their ability to do all kinds of really creative, neat things in space makes them a really significant challenge to face. And then there's the way they get after you at the point of attack too. It's not the biggest group or the most mauling group on paper. At least if you look at them, you're like, yeah, these guys won't kill. But if you look at the way Gedeke and Mauk come off the football, that sort of changed things a bit. And Barton at the second level, he's looking to finish. And Wirfs has gotten way nastier as his career's gone on. And Bredesen has been somebody who plays with an edge. So they just bring it, and their ability to run a variety of schemes, I think, has really helped transform the run game too. And then, you'd be remiss if you didn't mention the fact that Cade Otton's gone from a net negative as a blocker to one of the better blocking tight ends in the league, which has been a complete transformation that doesn't happen to many tight ends. And the ability to do it in space and at the second level is the unique part, right? It's not like he's just backside cutoffs or split action chopping the end, but he's actually like down blocking on guys. He's in line, kicking guys out. He's pulling and getting into space and wrapping and hitting guys. And it's just been really impressive to see how he's bought in, and Payne Durham has been a big part of that as well. So yeah, it's just a unit. Whenever a run game's successful, it almost always starts with a scheme, and then it starts with unit buy-in. And that Bucs have both of those things. They have one of the most diverse run schemes in the entire league, and then they have full unit buy-in from everybody in terms of executing, loving what they're doing, loving what they're being asked to do, and then all the work they're running counter at one of the league's highest rates now. They're pulling at one of the league's highest rates. And when that happens, there's nothing linemen enjoy more than those things. So you've got guys doing what they want to do and what their skill set suggests they can do, and they're doing it at the peak of their power. So as a young group that's playing together, really together for the first time in this group, and we'll see if Bredesen's around long term, but the other 4 should be. And so that is just probably what can be more encouraging other than a franchise quarterback? Right. There's not many things more encouraging to a fan base than watching a young offensive line with this much upside come together and play at this level. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember being on your podcast last year. We're talking about Kadon. Just do something. Just throw your body into someone and just watch him become the guy, not just as a blocker, but as a playmaker too. He's really stepped up. I want to do a quick ad read here, then we'll jump into some more offensive talk here of the Buccaneers. But first, I want to give a big shout out to Buccaneers Cruise. Guys, you're running out of time to get your tickets. They just extended the date out. Call up, get your tickets now. You're not going to want to miss this. It's going to be such an amazing time. March 7th to the 10th out of Fort Lauderdale, down to Key West, to the Bimini Bahamas. There's going to be so many players on here. Jordan Whitehead, Brad Johnson, Trey Palmer, Mike Allstott, Luke Gedeke, Graham Barton, Jamel Dean, Yaya Diaby, Kalijah Cansey, Tristan Wirfs, Derek Brooks is going to make an appearance, Dexter Jackson, and so many more. This unforgettable vacation that's going to feature a variety of events, including cocktail parties, sail away parties, trivia contests, bingo, player panels, water volleyball competition between the players and the crew, and so many more theme parties that keep the fun going all cruise long. You guys don't want to miss out on this awesome opportunity to make lasting memories with your fellow Bucs fans from all around the country. Obviously, your family and friends that you go with and your favorite Bucs players. It's an amazing time. You get to have one-on-one conversations with these guys and get to know them off the field more than just the jersey number on their back. It's an amazing time. Definitely get it. Can't wait to go. Look forward to seeing a bunch of you guys on there. Let's talk about these running backs here a little bit because you had an interesting stat. Bucky, is a little banged up, and we'll get into injury talk here in a couple minutes and see, what, his prognosis could be. But you had an interesting stat on your podcast about Rachaad White, and I feel like he's become the forgotten man. Only had 1,500 yards last season, 10 yards shy from 1,000 rushing yards on the ground. Has 10 touchdowns, receiving second in Bucs history with the receiving touchdowns. And I think he's been someone that the Bucs fans have forgotten about. Bucky is a lot easier to chant Rachaad. But I feel like he has had at times the raw end of the deal with the scheme that they've been running. We saw, I think, last week when he's running more of these gap schemes, these counters, these pin pulls, these traps, and all this stuff. You can see that he's still that same guy. You had a lot of interesting to say about him, and then there's your general consensus about Bucky, how he's been. Obviously, we know Trey was high on him from the draft right at the get-go, called it out before any of us. What's your thoughts been on the running backs this year?
Yeah, I mean, we just got to learn to have more nuanced opinions than so-and-so is good and so-and-so is bad. And hopefully Bucs fans, some of them already knew it. Hopefully some have learned it this season too. Like, both these guys are good. Like, you're operating from the premise of trying to figure out what strengths and weaknesses are different and where their limitations exist that somebody else's might not, and what the best fit is for. But like the fact that we can't watch, but I mean, how does somebody that plays as clean a game as Rachaad White, people are out here saying that he was bad? Like, that's just a really silly, like, that is truly box score watching and just looking, he was averaging, early in the season, 2.9 yards per carry or whatever. People reacting to that
1 yard on first down,
Yeah, like without looking at any of the context. Meanwhile, at the time, especially early in the season, Rachaad White was running almost all of the Bucs zone scheme carries. Bucky was getting hardly any of them. And often when he was getting them, they were from sort of like different alignments that were throwing off the defense. He was kind of the change-up guy, the trick play guy. He was getting, it was outside zone, but he was getting it from a jet motion. So it's like a different read than what Rachaad's getting it from the backfield. Rachaad was the back he was dead last in the NFL early on in the season. I forget where the cutoff was, week 6 or something like that, maybe 5. But early on in that season, when Bucs fans were really criticizing him, he was averaging the least amount of yards before contact in the entire NFL, meaning that he was getting hit in the backfield constantly. So his stuff rate was even high. Should have been higher. Stuff rate is obviously when you get hit at the line or behind the line of scrimmage as a back and you get tackled there. Should have been even higher, but he was never an outside zone fit. And so Cohen had to kind of figure that out and was like, this isn't going to work in terms of like being able to base our offense out of it. Not only is he not an outside zone fit, that might not even be true, although I don't think he plays fast enough to be an ideal outside zone back. I think speed is one of the most important assets for an outside zone back. It's not the only one, but speed and burst. And that's not really his game. But if you see him in gap scheme, you recognize the fact that he can get downhill and he has great vision, and he has better vision than Bucky Irving. And that way, if you watch Bucky Irving tape, at least from behind the line of scrimmage, and you kind of see how things develop, he will miss a couple reads every game. Yeah. Now, when he hits, he's arguably better. He's right now breaking tackles. He's near the top of the league in all those regards. But yeah, some of the stats just on Rachaad White to get to what you were mentioning there is that he is currently on gap scheme carries as he's received more and more of those as the year has gone on. He's looked better and better. And the 3 games in this season in which he has gone over 70 yards rushing and averaged, I think his best yards per carry were maybe in all 3 of those games, certainly up there for the season. All 3 of those games were ones that he received almost all gap scheme carries rather than zone runs. And so as the Bucs have gravitated more that direction, this past game against the Raiders was the most gap scheme runs in a single game. I believe 20 was the number on that. I have to double check that.
It was like right on there.
I think it was something like that. But he is Pro Football Focus's number 1 graded running back 90 grade on his 56 gap scheme attempts this season. So he has been their most impressive player. He's averaging 0.29 forced missed tackles per play. That's basically right around a forced missed tackle every 3 carries on a gap scheme run. If you're forcing missed tackles as a running back, there's really no better way to add value to what you're doing. And he's doing that with a really low stuff rate too. So he's not just like breaking tackles in the backfield. He's breaking tackles beyond the line of scrimmage. His stuff rate is the second lowest among all 41 backs on gap scheme carries. And he already has 9 explosive runs at 10+5 yards in that situation. So 34% of those gap scheme carries have gone for a first down or touchdown. Only Kyron Williams has better statistics than those on gap scheme carries. Now, Bucky Irving's been exceptional on gap scheme runs. He is also one of PFF's highest graded players, and he has actually more forced missed tackles per carry on gap scheme runs. So you were talking about 2 outstanding gap scheme runners that are really, really hard to tackle and have both been pretty decisive in terms of how they've run. On zone, it changes quite a bit. Bucky has been better than Rachaad in zone situations this season. I mentioned there's some contextual alignment things to that would probably be worth getting into and examining. But I do think it's probably fair to say Bucky might be a better fit in those regards, but also the Bucs have just blocked it better as the year's gone on, and Bucky's gotten more zone carries as the year's gone on, and they've become a better blocking team as the year's gone on. But he is a little bit quicker and more explosive. Both are great at breaking tackles. I think Bucky is probably even better than Rachaad at breaking tackles. But Rashaad's vision is one of the reasons why he's really reliable in short yardage situations, I think. And they rely on him so much is that he typically doesn't get flattened by the first tackle. And so usually he leans and extends and can gain when you need him to. So both players, we haven't even gotten to the pass game where both these guys are awesome, but both these guys are really versatile and really perfect fits for what the Bucs want to do. And they are really happy for each other and content to share the backfield together. And so speaks to the team culture in Tampa Bay that is amongst the strongest in the league.
Yeah. And I think it's a credit to Liam Cohen too, for realizing that, hey, these zone runs aren't working with Rachaad or really with Bucky. And as you mentioned, they're starting to block it better, and Bucky runs it a little bit more. Earlier in the year, they were giving Bucky more of that gap because he ran a lot of it at college. Still ran some zone as well, but was clearly more comfortable running the gap. Now that the offensive line has been getting better at blocking it, although, again, Liam realizing that, hey, these guys are better in gap, we're going to run that more. I think it's a testament to him to realize, hey, I came in, I wanted to run this mid zone, inside zone, outside zone scheme, but it's not working. Our guys up front block this better. Our backs run this better. This is the direction we're going to go. And you've seen the kind of transformation. The Bucs have 150-yard rushing the last 3 games, which I think is the second most in Bucs history of that stat. So they're crushing it there. Sticking with the offensive side of the ball real quick. Let's talk about these wide receivers too. You did a good job breaking down kind of McMillan, his ability to get separation in this past week's game. Does he need to step up in order for this Bucs team to kind of really take that next level, especially if they do make the playoffs and into the playoffs?
I think that's fair to say. I mean, it doesn't necessarily that he has to be Chris Godwin or something like that, but it's clear they are going to play him probably the second most amount of snaps. I mean, Sterling Shepard has been their second best wide receiver since Godwin went down, but McMillan's going to play a lot. He's going to play outside. And so Shepard, they see more as the slot guy. And I totally get that. I think it's where he's at his best. I'd probably play Shep a little bit more than McMillan, but they're coming from the perspective that they want to develop him. They want him to be the Z in this offense. They want to make sure that he's able to get open against all different types of coverages. They think that if he hits, their offense can go back and continue to be a really special group. And it's hard to argue that they're wrong about that. I think that he is an important piece. His route running and ability to create separation consistently against all types of coverages, be in the right spot all the time, and then catch the football really well. Those are questions to me. I think that's the path for him to be a player. He's not going to be a guy that mosses cats every week. I don't think he's going to be this unbelievable deep threat contested catch guy or ball tracker down the field or anything like that. Right. He's got to get open at all levels, and he's got to catch the football really consistently when he's open. And that's been an adventure this season. He's made a lot of mental mistakes. He's dropped the ball at times when he should. This past game was definitely the best in terms of a route running perspective. On the interception, the overthrow by Baker, I talked about this in the video. he has McMillan for a touchdown. It's, 4 verts against cover 3. He looks off the safety. He should be able to go back to McMillan there. He just never gets there. He panics and kind of throws the ball up, and it's kind of a disaster play. But McMillan won on his route and was open down the opposite seam for a touchdown. And so those are the kind of things you're like, when you watch both of his touchdowns, were like, yeah, this, it's a bluff screen, and they totally blow the coverage, and he's wide open for the first one. The ball's a little bit late, so it made it look a little tighter on the TV copy, I think. But yeah, he's wide open because of the scheme. And then the last one, they wiped out the entire sideline. He got the ball.
Great play call.
Yeah, it's like those 2 plays in of itself don't do a ton for you. But then you look at the context of the rest of the tape and see how often he was open in the game, and you feel really encouraged. So I would say outside of the box score, he played his best game. The box score looked nice in the end, but I'd say the rest of the stuff was even better and more impressive from him on tape. Obviously, his drop could have been one of the biggest plays in the entire game. It was unbelievable anticipation throw by Baker, and he just came out of his break not ready for the ball. This is the pros. You got to be ready for the ball coming out of your break. And so I think those things could come and develop in time, or he could just always be inconsistent in that way, and which way that goes will determine how good of a player he can be. But it's certainly not out of the question to see him as like a number 3 type of receiver in the NFL in terms of his progression in the option in the offense if he continues to develop. But he really has to be a guy who wins at the finesse and technical aspects of the position, because I don't see him as a physical athletic dominator in all areas of the field as a receiver. So he's got to be kind of good at the details to be great, I think.
And that's what he did well in training camp. He was like, we try not to dart in 2.0 him, but he was so smooth in training camp. And then, that first game, he used the touchdown, and then he just kind of falls off a little bit there, lost some trust with Baker Mayfield. But I think, if he can have a strong campaign, he's already been out snapping Shepard, in the games. He's been out there more consistently than him. Not that he's been targeted more than him. Baker certainly has a level of trust with Shepard, and hopefully this builds that up. But to add another reliable pass-catching option to this offense, they're going to trust Mike, and he's going to trust Shep. So if he can start to get that feel with Jalen, it's just going to open up more things. Let's jump into this injury report. Before we do that, I want to shout out my sponsor, FanGo Tickets. If you're tired of getting blitzed by big ticketed companies, turn to FanGo, your exclusively locally owned and operated Tampa Bay ticketing partner that offers fans like you full transparency. When I say full transparency, I mean it. They literally show the prices of the tickets, the taxes on the tickets, and how much they're making on each ticket. They prioritize fair pricing and no hidden fees so that Tampa fans can enjoy events without unsuspected costs. Visit fangotickets.com for unbeatable prices, personalized seat selection, and local partnerships that'll take your game day to the next level. They're rolling out so many cool things. Again, you can buy your tickets there. You can get your parking there. You can even get reservations to a local bar and grill or a sports bar around there. Say you're going to a Lightning game, Hat Tricks is right there. You want to get a table at Hat Tricks. Walking in there before a game is going to be a nightmare. Buy your tickets at FanGo. You get a reserved table. You get 2 beers and a burger combo type deal like that. So you're already all set. Parking's included in that. Soon they'll be adding hotels as well. So if you're coming from Orlando or somewhere else in Florida or out of town, you can even get your hotel to that. Super big things going on at FanGo. Check them out. They're doing awesome stuff. Check out FanGo Tickets, and locally owned and operated. We always love to support that. Let's get into this injury report because it's hilarious. Now it was 19 yesterday. Now it's 20 players long with the addition of Cameron Johnson. Ben Bredesen, he was out with a shoulder injury yesterday, limited today. Again, this was a walkthrough type practice. KJ Britt out with an ankle both days. Mike Edwards out with a hamstring both days. Mike Evans out with a hamstring both days. Greg Gaines jumped up from limited to a full participation with the knee. Golston's been on the injury report every single week with something. It's changed, but he was full participation. Logan Hall, full participation with a shoulder injury. Josh Hayes went from did not practice to a limited participation. Bucky, Irving, Christian Izien. Bucky's got that back, hip, and toe. Head, shoulders, knees, and toes. He did not practice as well. Christian Izien with the groin did not practice. Raheem Jarrett was a full participant with a finger. Cam Johnson, who's on IR, he had his 21-day window activated. He was limited with an ankle injury. Keep was bumped up from limited to full with an ankle injury. J.J. Russell was limited again with a hamstring. Sterling Shepard for the second day did not practice. Tae Smith limited with that knee injury he suffered. What a huge game from him. And I know he's one of your guys, so we'll talk about him. Joe Tryon-Shrenka, full participation. Looks like he's making that trend to coming back this week. Marquise Watts, full participation. They need to make a decision on him, whether they're bringing him back or sitting him down. It's weird to me how if someone's trending in the right direction, they can just say, oh, no, we don't need you. We're going to keep you on IR, even though they're clearly healthy. Antoine Winfield Jr., we know, will be out for a couple weeks with a knee strain. He didn't practice, and Tristan Wirfs, dealing with that foot knee injury, did not practice as well. That was a mouthful. That is a long-ass list of injured players. John, you think the Bucs, after being the healthiest team last year, where do you think they would be potentially? And we're playing hypotheticals here if they did not suffer all these injuries. And I'm not even talking about like a season losing injury to Chris Godwin or something. But how much do you think their inability to stay healthy has really affected where they're at this season?
I definitely think it's fair to say they probably win another game or two. The defense is, but I mean, think about the Chiefs game. Like, not having an NFL caliber player at that cornerback spot opposite Zion and McCollum was just a huge part of that game. I mean, and honestly against San Francisco too. Like, it's not even just that they've had injuries in the secondary, and obviously that goes back to Bryce Hall in the preseason, and they end up having to play guys that they never expected to have to play. You know, and you could say, oh, they should have been more cognizant of their depth going into the season. Okay, that's fair, I guess. Like, I'm not ruling that point out necessarily, but you know, you don't expect her to have to turn to your number 4 outside corner. Like, it's just a hard thing to have to do. And 5, whatever it is at this point.
Bryce Hall.
So, yeah. So, I mean, not having NFL caliber players, Funderburk, and when Funderburk and Merriweather was fine this past game, up until this game, Funderburk and Merriweather and even Tavier Thomas, the little bit he's played, and Josh Hayes, when those guys have had to play this season, and they've had to play because of so many injuries, they've not been NFL caliber players. Like, they've been completely brutalized. And so that is really hard. Like, you're just not even able to hold the line at all. Even if, and I've said this, like, I have lots of issues with the theory of Todd Bowles' defense, even at its peak and doing what it wants to do. I don't always love the process of a defense built like his. But they weren't even doing those things well. They weren't executing the theory of a Todd Bowles defense at all. They've gotten back to that recently, and the caliber opponent probably has something to do with it. They have a little bit healthier. But they just keep losing people in the secondary, and so that's a massive, massive problem at this point. And so that, even if they were at full strength, I don't know that I would believe much in this defense. I think there's too many limitations here. But offensively, I mean, obviously, if you didn't have Godwin, if you had Godwin and Evans for the stretch they had him, but everybody deals with injuries. They've weathered that storm offensively about as well as you can. Defensively, it's been much, much, much more difficult for them. And even at full strength, I think there's limitations defensively. So we'll have to see, obviously, how these guys step in and fill in. But it's, you know, it's just part of the way it goes sometimes. I know people want to come up with theories. I thought Bowles made a good point this week. And he said last year we were one of the healthiest teams in the league, and everybody wanted to do what we were doing. And this year we do the same thing, and it just doesn't work. And so these teams have been doing this forever. Like, the Evans thing was grossly mismanaged. The Godwin thing was mismanaged. I think those things are legitimate complaints. The rest of it is just how it goes. Like, you get lucky some years, you don't other years. The 49ers have been unbelievably healthy years. They've made it all the way to the Super Bowl. They've been a disaster and not made the playoffs because of health. So it controls a lot, and there's only so much you can do as an NFL team.
Yeah, and I think this secondary has not played a full, complete game together all season long.
And that was this case not last year, but the year before, I want to say, too. I think Brady's last season.
Or something like that. That was the first time.
And maybe the year before that as well. I don't think they played. Yeah, it's been a mess. So it's been a mess in that regard. And that was why they moved on from Carlton. I think to a point, they thought he'd struggle to stay healthy. And he's been banged up this year. I think he's played most games for the Lions, but he's been banged up at times, too. And so, I mean, that it is fair to say with Winfield that was one of the questions. Obviously, they paid him. They don't really have any choice. Like, you're going to pay him. He's not missed so much time that you're not going to pay him. Like, so it's just part of the risk. And, you know, none of these injuries have been like debilitating or like you're out for season or like long-term, what's the outlook? But he's just, even go back to college, he's had a lot of injuries and he gets hurt a lot. And you wonder if the body will break down. And so, you know, it was always the chance. You paid Jensen. What else are you going to do? Like, he's, you know, and obviously the worst happened. Jensen hadn't missed a game as a Buck. And so, sometimes you take those risks and they come back to bite you. Unfortunately, Light's probably had more of that than other GMs when you think back to Justin Evans, Kendall Beckwith, those types of players and the situations that have happened with those guys that were kind of like freak things. But the Bucs are just going to have to continue to weather that with Winfield and hope that it doesn't become a recurring thing after the season, that he can get healthy, because he just hasn't looked healthy all season, even when he's been playing. And so you have to get him back to a premier level. Otherwise that contract's going to hurt you.
All right. Yeah. 5'9", 180 some odd pounds, small guy to be colliding all the time. When you're having this rotation of linebackers, whether it was Devin White last year, or you're down to Vi Jones now this year, and JJ Russell and all these guys, Antonio Greer coming in, and you're having to be the one to come up and make all these tackles, it's going to wear on your body. And, unfortunately, I think you're seeing that happen this year. Tae Smith, playmaker, though. Wow, what a guy, man. I know you did your midseason all-pro team kind of with Trevor. You both had him as your slotted in as your nickel cornerback. I know Quintanamo Bay over there, Quinion Mitchell, has had a good year at cornerback. But, even with the injuries, you look at what he's been able to do. How impressed are you with what Tae Smith has been able to do this year? And, if you were kind of, as far as nickel backs go in the league, where do you have? Is he already in your top 5? Because I kind of look around the landscape of the league, and I think he's up there for me. Certainly in the top 10, if not the top 5.
Yeah, I'll have to look at that one. Ollie and I are going to do kind of our positional ranking / tiers probably starting in January, and do those throughout the month of January. And so it'll be interesting to look at each of those position groups. But amongst the rookies, this has been a really good class in this regard. Mike Sanders still in Washington has played mostly outside, but I think he projects there at some point. You've seen Andrew Phillips play well in the slot, and Javon Bullard's moved there some for Green Bay. And so, yeah, it's just been a lot of, there's been a lot of good slot, but Cooper DeJean's been one of the best. And I think I'd still say Tyke's been the best when he's been out there this season. You name it, he's kind of done it really well. He's a really smart, aware player. And he kind of knows what's developing around him in zone coverage, which is really key. I like when guys just don't cover grass, and he's really made a lot of plays in zone coverage by being aggressive to match receivers in his area. And that is a transformative trait in this secondary. He and Zion both have done that this season, and that has made the Bucs secondary much more combative than they've been. And I think if there's a criticism I have of Winfield, it's that he has covered grass too often in his career and hasn't been aggressive enough as a deep safety. He hardly ever gives up anything up, but I think when he's more aggressive as a free safety, then you start to see the defense play at their absolute best. And that's obviously always been the thing with Jamel Dean, is that he's a react guy, not a proactive guy in coverage. And so I love that about Tae Smith. I think that he is the type of player at that position that is so well-rounded, can make a massive difference. It'll be really fascinating to see what happens with him as a blitzer, because I think that's the area which, if he could be a part of what they're doing as a blitzer, and they've used him at times this year, I don't know that I've seen him and watched him and been like, oh, unbelievable blitzer, right, unbelievable at timing it up and getting home and all those sorts of things. And that might be the next step and his evolution as a player, perhaps. But that could be an asset if Bowles does stay around, and that is part of what the defense does. Then I think that could be a real asset to them if he's able to develop in that way. But that's a pretty niche thing. He's only rushed 39 times this year. And I don't think it's been like a disaster by any stretch, but I think that's an area which you could see him make a lot of improvement. And I think that improvement would be a big boost to the defense. And so, but run defense, zone coverage, man coverage, yeah, he's been pretty awesome all year, and one of their most reliable defensive players as a rookie.
Yeah, I think part of the problem too is you haven't had Antoine Winfield healthy. Then you lose Jordan Whitehead. You don't really have a trusted linebacker that you feel like can step and drop into that coverage to allow him to pick up the tight end or to pick up the back out of the backfield. Unless it's Levante, and you're asking so much from Levante right now as it is. I think if they find a solution to linebacker, get some healthy guys healthy in that secondary, I think he'd maybe get more opportunities. And maybe perform better in those with a little bit more confidence that, hey, stuff's not going to break down behind him when you're sending him, because you need him. That play on Brock Bowers is just, again, as you said, just instinctive, intuitive, and finding the ball. Zion McCollum, another huge huge. If you guys watched, I was all in on Zion McCollum this year. He's had a phenomenal season. But I want to talk about, before we get into some of these guys' questions here and wrap up the show, I want to talk about your thoughts on this weekend's game against the Chargers. It's not a must-win, so to speak, for the Bucs to make the playoffs, but in your mind, is this a must-win for the Bucs to show that maybe they can advance in the playoffs? Is this a must-win to show that you can beat a winning team and a team that's played fairly well, a team that's got a pretty good defense? That, hey, if you beat this team, maybe the divisional is back in there, or do they feel like a one-and-done team if they don't lose and they end up winning out?
I don't know that it's that simple. I mean, it's all about matchups when you get to the playoffs, and so I don't know that
it's going to be the Vikings or the Packers or one of those two teams.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would necessarily characterize it that way per se, but I mean,
just to show you something, though. That's what I mean. Not like,
yeah, I mean, you're going to feel way better about them if they're able to go out and win a game against a quality opponent, because it's just been a while since that happened. Now, they did it early in the season, but the Lions game, they played well for sure. I think the Lions had lots of opportunities in that game and probably didn't get all the way there. The Eagles are a totally different team when they played them early in the season. Now, they've always given the Eagles issues. They could absolutely give the Eagles issues again. But I think the Chargers, I think, are the real, it's a good test for them in a lot of different ways, because this season the Chargers run defense has been really, really good. And so I think, are they able to continue to have the type of success they've been having even against the run defense that's been much, much improved this season? That's going to be a big test for them, I think. In general, the way the Chargers play defensively, I mean, if you're talking about two guys who weren't in the league last year and are now going to be two of the hottest head coach candidates, probably even. I don't know if either of them will get a job offer, because there probably won't be as many this year around. We always say that, but I don't know that there'll be as many this year as in the past. But I think that if there are, those guys will probably get interviews, and those are probably the two guys that are new to the NFL that have piqued the most interest. I mean, Cohen's obviously been in the NFL before, but he wasn't in there last year. And so I think that is part of it for them, is Liam Cohen against Jesse Minter, that matchup, how it unfolds. Minter has done such a good job with the Chargers defense. If you watch them, they fly to the football, a lot of team speed defensively. They have a lot of speed up front. They play incredibly hard, physical, really technical team. They tackle well. They're not there's so much high-end super talent, but even though they're not at the peak of their powers, I mean, Derwin James is still a really good player, and Joey Bosa is still a really good player, and Khalil Mack's still a really good player. So you still have really good players, even if they're not at their absolute career best. So they just test you everywhere. I think that at all three levels, their linebackers are probably one of the more underrated duos in the league. Deion Henley's a really good second-year player, and Denzel Perryman's been awesome for them. This career renaissance for him this season for sure, and is trimmed down. And so they do a lot of things really well. They are kind of, from a skill set perspective, a good matchup for Tampa Bay, because all the stuff that Tampa Bay likes to do underneath, well, this is one of the most athletic teams, and they play a lot of speed on the field defensively. They are smaller, so perhaps the Bucs try to mash them, and that is a successful strategy maybe. Some teams have had some success with that as the season's gone on. Their defensive tackles are probably one of the smaller groups in the entire league. So can you double and climb, and can you have success in the run game in a way that other teams haven't because you're that versatile as a scheme? Maybe, and that's going to be one of the greatest tests, is you've got this. I mean, Jesse Minter is leading the league in terms of defensive rotations and coverage rotations and just complexities of the safeties. And some 3 safety looks, a lot of different stuff post snap. So Baker's just going to have to be on it from that perspective. And you've got on the other side, one of the most creative offensive minds. So that part of the matchup is just so fascinating, and it'll be a good litmus test for the Bucs offense in terms of how good they can be. Defensively, you really have to. I mean, the Chargers just lean so much into explosive plays that you really have to be on it when it comes to that stuff. And that's going to really, I mean, the Bucs are usually actually pretty good at that, and Winfield's part of that, and he won't play obviously. But the Bucs are usually actually more susceptible to the underneath stuff, and we'll see how much the Chargers end up leaning into that stuff, and really how well they're able to run the ball without J.K. Dobbins, I think, will be a part of this too. So fun matchups all across the board. I think it's going to be overlooked probably by other games because it's the Chargers and the Bucs, and they don't get a ton of national attention. But I think it's going to be one of the must-watch games just from a coaching matchup perspective.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun there with these two teams. After falling apart last year, after making the playoffs and falling apart in the playoffs of the Jaguars, and what many thought would a rebuild this year. Harbaugh's got them in the right direction. Last read here, then we'll fly through you guys' questions, and we'll put a bow on this show. But big shout out to Mosley Heating and Air. When Florida heat hits hard, trust Mosley Heating and Air to keep you cool and comfortable. With over 25 years of experience, their family-owned business knows what it takes to keep your home's HVAC system running smoothly. Need a repair, a new system, a maintenance plan? They've got you covered. Call Mosley Heating and Air today at 813-230-3742 or visit mosleyheatingandair.com. Mosley Heating and Air, where comfort meets reliability. If you're from Florida, John knows this is the time where you want to get all your maintenance done, where you maybe don't have to run the machine as often because it's a nice brisk 46 degrees out right now.
46.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a cold, but it was up to 80 this morning. This afternoon. So still beautiful.
In the teens
all right.
Here, so.
Yeah, I couldn't do it. I can never go back, man. I can't. I don't know how you did it. I do know how you did it, but I just still don't know. All right, let's jump into these questions real quick. We'll fire them. We'll do a quick little one-liner response. Is the Bucs run game the single best turnaround you've ever seen in 1 year?
Shout out Greg, absolute king. Appreciate you, Greg.
I can't think of any.
It's up there for sure. Yeah, I mean, just thinking about run game transformations would be tricky. Before Dobbins got hurt, I don't know what statistically they were, but just when the Chargers couldn't run the ball at all, and then they were definitely on track to be a really good rushing team. I think they'll probably need another year. Their O-line's not as good as the Bucs group. And they had some injuries too that kind of slowed them, but they looked really like they were moving in the right direction at the beginning of the year. I think that there's some other cases around the league. I'm trying to think of other ones that have been that transformational 1 year. But the idea of the Bucs, the added layer to it is that it wasn't hitting week one. It wasn't like it came out. It was just like week one, everything's good to go. It was within the context of the season to change that much. And that takes time, and it has taken them time, but it is very rare for that to happen. I think they're fourth in EPA per rush and up there in success rate too. So they're just what they've been able to get to in terms of that stuff, especially without they don't have Saquon Barkley, in all respect to the guys they have. They don't have Barkley and Henry at his peak of his powers. And so it is just a different
3rd and 4th round pick and an undrafted free agent.
Exactly. And those guys are great, but they're not once in a generation type of runners. And so you don't have that and you're still, getting this kind of production. It's very impressive.
I think another added layer to it as well is it's not just 1 year. The Bucs haven't sucked at running the ball for just 1 year in their bounds. It's been 3 straight years of them finishing dead last for them to come around and have a top 10 rushing in the league. PJB Philip Berger asks, how much of an impact do you think Deion Jones can have? He'll wear 45, LSU guy too. Comparing him to Kevin White there. Hopefully not. Maybe as a blitzer, but hopefully not in anything else.
This is pretty tough. I mean, my expectations are on the floor for anybody who joins the team at this point in the season. Right. I don't believe Deion Jones. Yeah, he hasn't played at all this season. He was in camp with, I don't even remember who.
Thing or something.
Yeah, played a little bit with Carolina. I mean, the run defense has been abysmal for years for him now. I mean, even at his best, he was never a great run defender. Where's the athleticism at? Because at his peak, when he was at his best, he was one of the best coverage linebackers in the entire NFL. Like his range and zone coverage and his ball skills were very Levante-esque. Now he was never the run defender Levante was. He was never the tackler that Levante was. And so, they don't have an NFL caliber linebacker on their team other than Levante. And even Levante's faded. Like even when Britt's healthy, they just don't have that guy. Like I'd said this to Josh the other day, but nobody that's in their linebacker room is going to play meaningful defensive snaps after this season for another team. Like they're not, unless there's a rash of injuries, they're special teamers or they're out of the league. And so because of that, Deion Jones is probably going to play at some point, but they're out here against the Raiders in dime defense all the time, like 20 some snaps because they just
5-1-5.
Yeah. In some ways it's made them faster. So obviously there'll be a drop off at certain points and the Chargers could be a team that presses on that advantage.
Right. Bobby, give you some love. He says, John, always a pleasure to see your content. Miss you covering the Bucs. We all do. That's why we all try to get him on here and pushed him to start the Bucs podcast as well because we needed it. Berger back again asks, is it me or does Mike Evans come off the field after catches more than most in the league?
I don't know about that. I don't know if there's a stat on that. I will say that he's not 100% for sure right now. There's a couple times in the All-22 he comes off after running a route and he just like raises his hand and walks off and doesn't look right. Now, Mike Evans is the king of bad body language during games. Like he always looks exhausted or hurt or something like that. So it is hard to tell. But given that he's not practicing at all, like he's not going to be 100% this season. So, he's playing. He looks completely normal when he's playing. Like I'm sure he's in pain, but nothing on tape suggests that when the ball is snapped, he is still as uncomfortable as ever. And so the fact that he's playing hurt and still there's been no decline has been absolutely nuts.
Hurdling people.
It got to be a great sign for longevity of a player when that's the case at his age.
Think he hits it? I don't think he hits it.
It's definitely possible. Like all you need is one of these big breakout games, which he's had at the end of the season. Yeah, I mean, if you have one of those big monster games, it's certainly possible. I don't know if it happens this week, but
money on the table. Does he hit it, John?
I don't think he hits it now. Just law of averages.
Yeah. Another wide receiver question here: should the Bucs bring back Chris next year, or should they use that money to invest in a pass rusher? I think I already know your answer.
They can do both. I mean, everybody dreams of Max Crosby or Micah Parsons coming to the Bucs. That's just not going to happen. Like neither of the teams are trading those players. Like the Khalil Mack thing happens once in a lifetime. It just is so rare at that position. Premium guy like that. But I mean, you could do both here in this situation. I think it's just all about how you manage the cap. I think more than anything, the Bucs aren't going to be flush. But if you want to and you feel like you're in that window. It really depends who your coordinator, because if Bowles is back, I don't think they break the bank for a premier edge pass rush or anything like that. But what you've got to be able to do is make plays for guys like the Donnell Hunters, the Reddicks when they got him, not now probably, but when the Eagles got him, those kind of things. And then those guys become those players in your system, or they become, Donnell Hunter was already established, but you bought low on him. And so, those are the kind of moves you have to be able to make, and you hit on one. The Shaq Barretts, I mean, that was an example. Right. And so those are the kind of, you have to be able to recognize and scout the talent, and that's what they need. They need a big scouting win, whether it's pro or college. They need a big scouting win at that position this offseason.
A little bit of love here from Josh Capo, our guy, two of my faves chopping it up. And Slim's thanks saying the great Jon Ledyard and the amazing JC. Appreciate him. You kind of talked about it, mentioned it. I'm going to skip this other one. I'll save Christopher Cole's for last, but I'll skip over to Elliott's. You said if Bowles is brought back, you don't know if they invest in a pass rusher. Elliott asked, I know it's early, but will the Bucs allow another OC to be poached to keep Bowles at head coach? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's just no way they're going to let Liam Cohen leave. Like, I think Jason Licht will do everything within his power. Now, ultimately, if Cohen is just like, you know what, I've got a head coaching opportunity with Trevor Lawrence and I want to take it. One of the key things around the league this year is that it's hard to tell right now, like how many good jobs are actually going to be open. Where last year, Herbert and the opportunity to work with him, it's like, oh man, like, is Lawrence even that good? Like, has he been better than Baker Mayfield? Like, I mean, you could argue there's more upside. But like, I don't think he's been better than Baker Mayfield, certainly not this year. So, is that a lateral move? Everybody likes Tampa Bay. That's the key with all of this when you think about it, because everybody wants to stay in Tampa Bay. Players, coaches, people like it there. They like the organization. The owners are fine to them. There's not a situation where you worry about getting fired all the time. It's a stable environment. The Jason Licht is one of the favorite people around the league to work for. All of this stuff is good in Tampa Bay, and the culture's good. The team, the locker room, players are great. Like, it's just a great environment. And Cohen has talked about that. I think he's sincere. So I think it would take a great opportunity for him to leave. And he's young enough, whereas Canales had been in the league a long time, and he didn't know if that chance was going to come again, frankly. Right. And I think, frankly, he was pretty surprised it came at all. And I think a lot of people were, and he's done a good job, but I think that with Cohen, it's going to be much different. Like, he will be able to Ben Johnson this thing. He is a rare talent at this, and he will be able to wait it out. So he could wait it out, and that could be something that happens, and he could Ben Johnson it. If they don't have any playoff success, I mean, I think if they don't win a playoff game, or they make the playoffs, they don't win a game. If they don't make the playoffs, like, I think Bowles is going to get fired. So I think that's the standard in Tampa Bay, and they're not willing to back off that standard. And so they need to go further than they did a year ago, or as far, at least, I think. And so we'll see what happens. That's a guess. I'm not like saying like that as a reporter or anything, so aggregators don't get me. But I just think that
don't do it, Dove.
I think that's the standard. And I think that if that doesn't happen, then, Cohen would be a head coach candidate, I would guess, at that point. But, he might be elsewhere too. And so we'll just have to see. But the Bucs are going to, they would not let it go without a fight for sure. It would be his choice, I think.
Yeah, I don't think he goes to a shitty situation. I think if he's going to go somewhere, it's going to be to work in a really good situation. Something like, maybe if the Pats opened up and he got the opportunity to work with Drake May, although they need a ton of help on the offensive line and in the wide receiver room. So I don't know, but I think it'd have to be a really good opportunity for him. Last one, real quick. Let's fire this off real quick. Is Baker being a little gun shy? I think he can be. We talked about it at the beginning of the show, Christopher, so definitely check it out. John also talked about it on his podcast on Audibles and Analytics. Check that out as well, but just your quick thoughts, response on his question.
I don't know if I'd say it that way. I mean, if gun shy usually means like he's hesitant or afraid to throw the football, into a tight window or something like that. I don't know what goes into the mental process. I mean, you have to walk through each play with him to figure out why he turns down throws that he turns down, but there's nothing like questionable or risky about the throws he has to make most of the time on tape. He just has to make them, and maybe he passes them up because he wants to make a play with his legs. A lot of times he passes them up because he drops his eyes. If there's any sort of pressure or restlessness up front or in the pocket, he'll drop his eyes or he'll speed up his feet and he'll miss a throw. And all those things are possible. So I don't think it's like he's hesitant to throw a ball that's like, there's all these high degree difficulty plays and he won't throw any of them. I think more than anything, it's just like he has a tendency to let the outside factors influence him more than they should on a given play. And that is one of the things that turns just should be neutral plays or even a good play or a solid play into disaster plays when you're letting the outside influences or outside factors influence you more than you should as a quarterback. You have to kind of control those things better, especially when it comes to pocket management. So I think those are the bigger issues more than being gun shy. Awesome
stuff. Awesome, amazing stuff by the one and only Jon Ledyard. As always, he delivers anytime you have him on, anytime you're listening to him. He's always giving you great, insightful information that's backed with tons of fact and some opinion in there too. But definitely look forward to everything he's got coming out, especially during the draft, the 4 pillars of pass rush. You got to get that into your system because the Bucs, I think, should be looking for a pass rush. But John, go ahead, tell everybody where they can find you, what you're up to next. I know you've got so much going on, so let everybody know where you're at.
Yeah, all my work is at the Audibles and Analytics Substack. That's my Substack. I do Steelers content over there. I do Bucs content and do NFL draft stuff and then general NFL stuff with Ollie too. We mentioned these podcasts at the top, but for Bucs fans, the Bucs Edition podcast, Josh Capo and I are usually on about every week in the season. And JC, you've been a guest on that show as well. And we talk Bucs in depth and game reviews and player performances and statistics and a lot of the scheme stuff that we're talking about on this show today. So we get into that pretty much each week after the Bucs game, which is a lot of fun. And then I usually write 1 or 2 Bucs things a week too. This week I did a video breaking down Baker Mayfield's performance, and I posted that on my Substack, and it's on the Audibles and Analytics YouTube page as well, which is just getting underway. So you can jump in there, and it's like $5 a month to subscribe to Audibles and Analytics, or $4.17 a month if you do the $50. You just pay $50 for the year. So when you get that and you get about 4 podcasts on there a week, you get NFL draft content and scouting reports, and you get 3 or 4 written pieces a week. It adds up to a lot. It's a lot of content, and I don't know that it'll always be that cheap of a price, but it is now. So go take advantage for $5 a month or $50 for the year for Audibles and Analytics. You'll get a lot of podcasts, a lot of written content, and now we're doing video too. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's definitely worth it. You can also find him at Ledyard NFL. Was it Ledyard NFL Draft?
Yeah, you got it.
Ledyard NFL Draft. He's always given awesome insight about the Bucs games, about his Steelers games, about the Phoenix Suns. I see you were just at a Penguins game the other day, watching the great Sidney Crosby. So he's got some awesome stuff going on there on his X page, Twitter page, whatever you're calling it nowadays. John, I appreciate the heck out of you, man. You know what you've done for me. In my career, I don't have to say it over and over again, but you'll always be my guy. I appreciate the hell out of you. Appreciate your time. I kept you over, but I felt like Macho Man Randy Savage and Spider-Man. I got you for 60 minutes. You're going nowhere. So I appreciate you coming on, sticking on, even though I kept you a little bit longer. Go watch the game. Enjoy your family. Tell them I said hi. Miss all you guys. Come back to Tampa. We miss you.
Proud of you, brother. Miss you too. I appreciate you having me on. It's always fun talking ball with you.
All right. See you later, man. That's going to do it for us here at the Pirate Parlay podcast on the Sick Podcast Network. I want to thank everybody for listening. If you're listening on any of the podcast streaming, appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. come over to YouTube. Come on over, check us out live. Like, subscribe, turn on notifications. If you guys are in the chats, appreciate you guys as always with the comments, with the questions. Appreciate everybody in there. Appreciate my sponsors. It's the time to kind of be thankful and appreciative of what you have. And I certainly am appreciative of everyone who tunes in, everyone who's responsible for the show, everyone who helps brand this show. Appreciate all you guys. That's going to do it for me here at the Pirate Parlay Podcast on the Sick Podcast Network. I'm your host, JCL. We're back tomorrow at 6 p.m. live, breaking down the Los Angeles Chargers, this matchup behind enemy lines, going in depth. So make sure you set your reminders on. We'll be back tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern. Until then, see you guys later. Peace out.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Pirate Parlay on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.